Joe served as the executive director on the Asheville Downtown Association. He was an urban designer at the city of West Palm Beach in Florida. He received a Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Miami and a Master's in Architecture and Urban Design from Harvard University. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Joe to Hamilton.
Thanks, Graham. And I want to thank Drew and also definitely thank the young architects for doing these little cards. They're awesome. So if you're all out there, thank you. These are great. I love the propaganda. It's been unbelievable. But that's how it works, right? It's about spreading information and getting information out there for folks. I might try to wander around a lot. I'm known to do that. This is an important presentation for me because I'm trained as an architect, and what I do in cities and working with cities, I often still see myself in studio. I see myself coming up with designs and coming up with information to convey that information to the public. And this is what we're trained to do, right? We're trained to create something, but also communicate that information. You know, we're oftentimes communicating really abstract ideas that we're creating to a jury, to our clients, and stuff like that. So we're trained with this capacity. We just need to tap into it more often. And definitely some really wonky and dorky stuff like property taxes. It's good to get that information out there clearly. So I'm going to start with I know some of you have actually seen my presentations before, so don't shout out the answers if you do. I just want to show you where I grew up. Because we're over here in Hamilton. This is where I grew up in Rome, New York, which is about the same latitude as this community. It's a pretty miserable place right now. In fact, what's kind of funny, I love this graphic that they actually promote themselves by all of the communities that they're near. You know, like, hey, we're 2 hours away from Cooperstown. Why don't you swing through Rome, right? When I was a kid, so Rome's heyday, it was the start of the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal went east and west through there. If you all ever sang the song about the Erie Canal with a mule named Sail, the original government mule, they actually talk about my hometown. And this is what it looked like in its heyday. This is downtown. And we struggled like a lot of industrial towns in the 60s and 70s with an identity. And somebody thought, well, you know, there was this pivotal battle of Fort Stanwix, the Revolutionary War. Now, I don't know how much you know about American Revolutionary history. Y'all remember Fort Stanwix battle? None of us did either. It's okay. But the fort actually was in sight where the downtown started. And so they thought, hey, let's build the fort. So they took all of these buildings and knocked them all down. And we got a wooden fort. So when I was a kid, you know, occasionally we get some Canadian tourists that show up, but that's about it. About 60,000 of you all a year come down to visit this fort. More than the people inside New York State, by the way. So you know our history better than we do. But I thought that was what cities go through. And if that wasn't good enough, we took an urban renewal grant and took the rest of the city, or the rest of downtown, and built a pedestrian mall because that was the fad at the time. Built a couple parking garages because of all the people that were going to show up for the fort, and then you know, we needed a plaza on the pedestrian mall, a new city hall, and because there were 80 businesses that took checks for relocation, 18 of them relocated in this project. The other 200 and some odd businesses moved to Florida. So that's kind of what I grew up with, and I thought, hey, I guess this happens everywhere, right? I went to architecture, oh, so there it is. This is my church, by the way. This church is what inspired me to go into architecture school. I used to sit in there and stare at the ceiling. So I was in high school and I was dealing with some lake effect snow and thinking, hey, it'd be kind of nice to go down to Florida. I mean, look, there's beaches down there. So that's why I went to architecture school in Miami. And at that time, these two were kicking around these ideas of new urbanism. You all know Liz Plitter-Zyberk and Andreas Dwani. And it was kind of fascinating to me. I was like, really? Places grow? There's growth going on out there? There's this stuff? That's insane. I had no idea. And so this is what they were dealing with. How do you handle the shape of the environment, this mass-produced architecture, that's building these places that are really places for cars, but not necessarily places for people. And this is what we were dealing with inside architecture school. It was kind of fascinating for me. So in a way, we were thinking of this American landscape as this kind of cartoon, but the reality of it is it's really a real place. This is San Antonio. So that's kind of where our architecture school changed into more of an urban design school. We were trying to deal with the basics of urbanism. While I was in school, I went to another Rome and did a semester abroad program to study architecture in Rome, Italy. And this is where my apartment was, and this is where my classes were, and this is where I ate. And the whole time I'm thinking, how is it that this Rome has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and my Rome is barely made it 200 years before it killed itself, right? You know, what's the difference between these two places? What's happening in cities with what's going on? And it really got me thinking about cities as a form of DNA, you know, that they have a path that they're on, and there's lessons you can learn from other places. My Rome can learn from the original Rome, right? Or if you want to see how I started my life, this is me when I had hair. And this is what I'm going to become, right? So I'm going to be Papa whether I like it or not, you know? There's things I like about Papa, there's things I don't like about Papa, or more importantly, I like this guy here, my dad. And I've got two genetic issues, aside from the hair loss. I'm genetically Italian, you all can tell that by my name, so I like to eat a lot. But we also have a genetic predisposition to heart disease. So every Minicozzi man in my family has had a heart issue. That's not a surprise for me. So I have to deal with that on a daily basis. The food that I eat, the exercise that I do, I think about that. You all do that, right? You look at your family members and see bad habits, good habits, and you see the genetic code that's in you. So this is what we do as people. Why don't we do that as cities? What's Hamilton's grandparent? What does Hamilton want to be when it grows up? Where's Hamilton's heart attack? What have you learned in that process? And what are you doing to change it? And these are questions to be asking yourselves as you continue to talk about the city. So, as a designer, it's kind of funny, I was in West Palm Beach at the time of the Hanging Chad. Y'all remember that vote? This is the butterfly ballot. And so the ballot was about this big, and you voted in the spine of the ballot. And I remember at 7:30 in the morning when I voted, when my hand, I'm right-handed, my right hand covered up all of these people, you know? And I was voting down this side, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, I know there's other people that were running, and I picked up my hand and I saw all these people. And you see how they zippered the vote? So people that thought they were voting for Al Gore and Joe Lieberman were really voting for Pat Buchanan. What's kind of interesting about this, for Palm Beach County, I don't know if those of you that know Palm Beach County, it has the highest per capita Jewish population on the East Coast outside of New York City. And it also had the highest per capita vote for the only anti-Semite on the ballot. And the county only lost, Al Gore lost the county by 600 votes. It's a population of 1.2 million people. When we talk about a national election, that national election was changed because of the design of a ballot. As a designer, you all know, we would look at this and go, why is the vice president the same font size as the president? You don't vote for a vice president. That can be 2 points smaller. Then you could fit all of these people on one side. I mean, that's the way that a designer would think. This is the importance of design. Y'all get that? I mean, I'm maybe dwelling a little too far on this one, but it's a really important thing. So that's one thing to be aware of. The second thing to be aware of is what's happening inside your tax code to steer the way that cities are operating. And I love this quote from Mark Twain. A person who won't read has no advantage over one who can't read. So how many people in this audience have read your tax assessment policy for your codes and tax assessors? You got one hand, two hands? This is the way cities operate. This is the cash flow of how cities are financed. And if we're going to talk about design of cities, we need to understand the cash flow of cities. So we'll get into that in a minute. But the biggest question I want to put before you is, what is a city and how does a city operate? So here's Asheville. This is where I live now, up in the mountains of North Carolina. This is how it started life back in the 1800s. This is a shot down Main Street. 15 years after this picture was taken, this is what happened. We like to say that the 3 T's made Asheville: trains, tourism, and tuberculosis. When the train lines came down there, it brought a flood of tourists and people moving down there to escape the polluted Northeast. Presidents come to visit. We had Teddy Roosevelt. Obama's been there about 3 times. We had the second streetcar line in the entire country. The only community that beat us was Richmond. During that period of growth in the 1920s, we were growing by 20% in population every single year throughout the decade, which is explosive growth. In that growth, we became the second largest city in North Carolina. A lot of people don't realize that Winston-Salem was the #1 city in North Carolina. #2 was Asheville. We were bigger than Charlotte, Raleigh, Wilmington. But we did that. We achieved the highest debt per capita of the entire United States. We were #1 in debt. Isn't that awesome? When the Depression hit, we thought we had $5 million in the bank. Turned out we had $18,000 in the bank. It's funny that we have a mayoral candidates forum tonight, but 3 days after the elected officials were indicted, the mayor committed suicide. So you all don't need to do that. That's a bit extreme. But it showed you the gravity of the situation. Thomas Wolfe is a famous American author. He wrote the book Look Homeward, Angel. He's the influence for Jack Kerouac. And this is what he had to say about his hometown. Asheville has squandered fabulous sums. They've flung away the earnings of a lifetime. They've mortgaged those of a generation to come. They have ruined a city, and in doing so, they've ruined themselves, their children, and their children's children. Those are some heavy words. In a way, we're still dealing with that effect. But that was 1930 when he said it. It took us, we chose to pay off that bonded debt, by the way, and it took us until 1976 to pay off that debt. During that period, we couldn't afford to do urban renewal. I love that it's like, not even at the top headline, it's like below the fold, and then they have somebody dying in a prison fire and something about abortions as the lead stories. Anyway, so after that, after we got ourselves out of that debt, we started cooking with gas. We tried to catch up to other cities. We built highways. We cut a highway through the north side of downtown, which became the Crosstown Expressway. Here's our city hall, by the way. This is the county building. There it is, the Crosstown Expressway. And the coup de grace to our downtown was when we did the bowcatcher cut and blew a hole through the mountain. And on the other side, by the way, I love that it's on a postcard. On the other side of that cut, the mall went, and sure enough, our downtown died. This is the same story community after community after community did. They changed their form of development pattern and essentially shot themselves in the foot. So this is our downtown from not too long ago. What a wonderful place to invest, right? I mean, look at these great opportunities. This is not so long ago, but that's a 1996 Chevy Celebrity, by the way. Just boarded up buildings, all of this stuff that we were too poor to tear down, just sitting there. Many upper stories. Aren't these great opportunities? I mean, you could blow a cannon off and not hit anybody. And anytime somebody tried to fix the downtown, like a Greek choir, those children's children would rise up and say, that'll never work here, don't even try. Not here. We've been down that road. We're not that kind of person. We're not like name city here. We're different. Y'all have those people here? Yeah. They're everywhere. Some people did try. This is Julian Price. He started our company, Public Interest Projects. Julian inherited a bunch of money and created a for-profit real estate development project. So basically, we became downtown developers. 75% of our money goes into the sticks and bricks. We fix buildings. And 25% we seed businesses to go into our buildings. But we're mostly about getting housing in the upper stories of these things. But it's about getting businesses on the street as well. Now, we're not the entrepreneurs to do the businesses, but we find people with great ideas for the first vegetarian restaurant, a nightclub, things like that. We put them in business and launch them into the community. But it's about making place. That's all we're doing. So this is one of our buildings before and after. It's kind of crazy. It's all hiding back there, right? There it is. It's the old Asheville Hotel. When we built this building, we actually went to the bank to get a final loan to finish off the project, a permanent loan on the back end. And it was kind of funny. We needed $4 million to finish the project, and we were going to cash flow it and pay them back. And the bank, seriously, no joke, they asked us to put $4 million in the bank so they'd give us a $4 million loan. And we're like, okay, yeah, we don't need you. Thank you. Bye. But when we did, what they told us we were crazy about is we were doing 400 to 600 square foot apartments. And they said that would never work in this market. No one lives in 400 to 600 square foot apartments. And now, here's the thing. Who in here would live in a 400 to 600 square foot apartment? Probably about 10% of the room. Let me change the question. Who in this room has lived in a 400 to 600 square foot apartment? That's it. We're 80,000 people. We just asked a different question. The power of asking questions is really important to us. Let me, for those of you that see me do this test, don't shut out the answers, but I'm going to give you all a couple of seconds to count the number of shapes that you see in this next image. So tell me how many shapes you see. I know it's late. Some of you have had some, hopefully not any beer or anything, but tell me how many shapes you see in this next image. 5 seconds. Ready? Go. Okay. Who has the answer? 20? 9. Okay. 19. Anybody want to go higher than 20? 21. This is like the Price is Right over here. Okay. So we've got 5 on the low end, 21 at the high end. Somebody want to go higher than 21? Oh, 42. All right. Anybody tell me how many kids were on the bus? 20. What time was it on the clock, Mr. 20? 5 o'clock. There's 5 kids on the bus. It's 10 after 10. I asked you a question. As creatures, we're very adept at cutting out the visual noise and answering a question, right? So I asked you a question. You turned off all the information that was right there in front of you, hiding in plain sight. When we talked about apartments in our community, we were talking about apartments and defining the market by defining the question. And we just changed the question. That information, that market demand was there. No one was looking for it. Those apartments that we built are essentially called hitting it out of the park in developer world. They've been 99% leased up ever since we opened those doors. There's a wait list to get in that building. So y'all see what I just did? There's a book on behavioral economics by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow that gets into that and how our brains are wired. As you're all, particularly for the mayors here, as you all are considering things that happen in your community, you're going to be presented with certain amounts of data. Being aware of how that all affects things is digging deeper in how your community operates. We'll try to get into that here. What we try to do as much as possible, I love this quote from Mayor Michael Bloomberg, is bring that data forward. I mean, there's our buildings, there's stuff that we're doing, but it also affects the community. We're all in this together. So we see land like a product, like a farmer sees land. When a farmer has land to till, the farmer doesn't till the entire farm. The farmer does things economically. What can we afford to fertilize? What can we afford to water? What's the crop yield in the marketplace? All of that is done on a per acre analysis. So this is one of our bills to 11 million. That's a 3,500% increase in taxes. One could look at that as a 3,500% penalty on us to do the right thing. We don't see it that way. We see that our community can now afford 3,500% more stuff. More art teachers, more parks, whatever they want. We don't care. It's the community's money now. Did y'all get that? Does anybody have an investment account or a retirement account that grows by 3,500%? You know, this is how you cultivate wealth in your own community. So that's our building, and people are like, yeah, Joe, that's fine. That's that building. But we've got these Walmarts over here. They're worth $20 million. That's huge. That's double our value. And we're like, well, that's fine. That's big. Walmart pays, this Walmart in particular, pays $270,000 in property taxes. Anybody in here pay that much? So this is my house. This is my wife, Caroline. These are my 2 dogs. They think they're lions. They're a little weird. But we live on 1/10 of an acre. We pay $2,000 in taxes. So if a 1 acre cookie cutter dropped into my neighborhood, it hit 10 houses. Y'all get that? Right? We're on a little 1/10 of an acre. So 1 acre produces $20,000 of taxes in my neighborhood. You take that same 1 acre cookie cutter, float it up in space, drop it on the Walmart, it's producing $6,500 an acre. Now what if you had an acre of our building downtown? You know, you go with the cash crop, and people are saying, okay, Joe, that's fine. That's property taxes. Walmart surely makes it back with retail taxes. So let's go ahead and remove me because I don't sell anything. Now, again, the misnomer is this is what the community gets. That's not what the community gets. That's what the community spends. That tax dollar travels up to the state and some of it trickles back. In our case, that's a tax, sales tax at 8 cents. The city gets 27% of that. So we're getting a percentage of a percentage. The nut of what comes down is $47,000, or a total tax take of retail and property taxes to my community for $51,000. That's just the property taxes that building pays. You have the retail taxes, you're cooking with gas, jobs per acre, everybody's concerned about jobs. And when you put this stuff side by side and normalize it in an apples to apples way, you really see what your community can get out of this stuff and where the biggest bang for your buck is. Did y'all get this? There's a book that I recommend usually. I need to start getting residuals for it. Michael Lewis's Moneyball. Anybody read Moneyball? Start by watching the movie. It's worth it. But it's about taking a different kind of thinking into any business plan, any business performance, to seeing the data that's really there. This is essentially Moneyball for cities. And I like to quote Chief Justice Brandeis. This is just the relentless rules of humble arithmetic. This is simple math. I'm an architect. I like to draw pictures, right? You know, this is really simple math to get into. Don't be afraid of it. Just run the numbers. So a city is essentially a finite boundary of land that's made up of, in your case, hectares. That's all you got, right? So how you use that land is really important. Asheville, as a boundary, is worth $10 billion. For those of you that are running for mayoral position, you're essentially running to be on a board of directors of a multi-billion-dollar real estate development project, right? So if Asheville's worth 3 times Donald Trump, aren't we asking those questions about our cash flow? What's the income? What's the efficiency? What are we paying for? Now, to put that in perspective, Asheville is worth more than all of our professional sports teams in our state combined, or to make it relevant for you all, we're worth more than yours as well. I mean, hell, we're worth more than all of your hockey teams together. So, don't you think we should be thinking about this stuff? And we talk about it in the sports pages. Why aren't we talking about it at home? So we try to help people understand the cash flow of things. We did a study in Sarasota, Florida. And it's kind of interesting. There's these developments. This is some god-awful place in Arizona somewhere. But if I were to build this, as a developer, I keep track of all the hard costs and soft costs. So I've got the land costs, permits, road, sewers, whatever. And then I just divide it by the rooftops, and that's how I sell it. When the city gets this, and they open up that little gate right there, and all of these people now operate in the city, does the city run the numbers on what it costs to police this, to provide fire protection, the road, sewers, and whatever, and then bill it accordingly? And the answer is no. We just send an assessor to go in there and figure out a value. Does it meet its actual cost? We don't know. So the state of Florida actually did this balance sheet. Actually, the state of Florida didn't start it. This guy was actually the first one. In 1973, the Nixon administration published this document. Did y'all know that Richard Nixon coined the term sprawl? Yeah. Well, there it is. Our federal government in 1973 basically said, this is the way that we operate in our country. It was just like, no one can afford to do this. We'll go ahead and do the data, and then we'll just hand it to you. So feel free to use it. And every community in the United States basically took these books and said, okay, thank you very much, put them on a shelf and just kept on going. Your state at least did some action. But the state of Florida did a second document as a follow-through in the 80s. And so we used that data, and you see the public facility cost per dwelling unit for downtown versus the burbs. The more you spread people out, and these are real places in Florida, by the way, the more the cost goes up. So we saw some stuff in Sarasota where we were doing the study, and we said, okay, we know that we've got some downtown stuff, and we've got some stuff that's kind of like the edge of Tampa, so we'll use those costs. Here's the suburban development. Here are some urban housing units from the downtown. So this is 357 units. So we plucked out 357 units, and we said, let's just let them ride apples to apples and see how they pencil out. So this is the land cost, the land consumption, the footprint of the downtown stuff. This is the footprint of the burbs. So for the same number of people, you're consuming 10 times the space out of your corporate boundary, right? So you've exhausted 10 times of your supply. It costs you 57% as much to service the downtown versus the suburban pattern. Okay? And we just pulled their tax bills. What are they paying? You're making 870% more money versus that, right? So in my world, actually in all of our worlds, if this is my mortgage, and that's Graham's mortgage, we'll go ahead and use you, Graham. This is my annual payment, this is Graham's annual payment. How long will it take me to pay off my note and Graham to pay off his note? It takes me 42 years. So think about that. When people make development choices, they're essentially bonding out your government services into a debt load that takes 42 years to pay off. And I'll tell you, if you talk to any engineer, how long does a road last? And the answer is 25 years. So you're still not out of the hole by the time you pay off the first round of infrastructure. Now in real estate development world, when I have cost, revenue, and time, I can do an ROI, return on investment. So for the government, it's an 18% ROI for the downtown stuff, it's a 2% ROI for the burbs. So if you all could put money in any kind of investment account, what do you want to put it in? A 2% return or an 18% return? Now, I was presenting this in Idaho. There was like a bunch of cowboys in the room with cowboy hats, and they're like, Joe, these are way too many charts. You're getting way too dorky for us. Just show it to us in year 20. So this is what it looks like after 20 years. You've essentially produced $34 million, and you're still in the hole $5 million with the suburban environment. Did y'all get this? Yeah? All right. Cool. So this isn't all that complicated. I'm going to say this time and time again. I don't have a CPA. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a degree in finance. I barely made it through my engineering classes. You know, it's like these are things that you all could do. You just have to see the design of the information that's behind it. So we're kind of known for doing this across the country, mashing up all the different cities that we've seen. This is the trend that we see. For every dollar of county taxes, now in my state, I pay city taxes and county taxes. In most states, that's true. So for every dollar of county taxes I pay, or a county resident pays, somebody out in the county, somebody inside the city limits is contributing $8 to the county. That's the reason why you see more sprawl in our country versus yours. The Walmart's somewhere around $7 of contribution. The malls double the Walmart. As soon as you get to a two-story building, this can be in the smallest town or the biggest city, you start to see it jump up, and it's not a proportional growth. Notice how it's exponential. You know, what we're trying to get the point across here is when you make things apples to apples and use land as that unit of consumption, you'll see efficiency. We already do this. We do this with cars, right? We don't talk about our cars on a miles per tank basis, do we? And if we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank, right? You see how silly that is. Because gas is the thing that drives these vehicles. Gas is that finite commodity. You can't make more gas. There's only so much of it on this planet. So we measure it by that gallon or that liter. On a mile per gallon basis, the numbers change. I didn't change the cars. So the reason why my numbers change is I'm just changing the question. We should all be driving BMW Acetas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to your Prius owners. 1955 technology. It's actually like a dangerous motorcycle with a cage around it. So, and Graham, you might need, I forgot to bring my timer up, so you might need to like wave or throw something at me when I get close to the time. This is my napkin sketch about what we're doing here. The more you bring data and evidence to the decision, the more you're going to see our community leaders get better decisions. And you want to help them do that. So what we do is we kind of treat the world like we treat our bodies. If I want to see my hard tissue, I use an X-ray. Use a device, get data, so I can see the hard tissue. Change the machine, I want to see soft tissue, I do an MRI, right? Same head, different data. And you can even do crazy like three-dimensional images of your brain. So can you do the same thing with the city? So we just go into the cities and counties and whatever. We've actually done regions the size of Connecticut and do a value map. And you can immediately start to see that this is my town. High value, over $2 million an acre. Low value is in green at $100 an acre. Can y'all tell me where my downtown is? You know, you don't need to be a GIS specialist to see that's it. So it's even better when you do it in 3D. Can you tell me where downtown is now? You know, as an urban designer, I can show you downtown, but hey, I can show it to you visually too. There it is, boom. And you see the scale difference in the wealth production of it versus all the other areas of our community. By the way, this big black hole right here is the Biltmore estate. America's largest house needs its biggest tax break. But anyway, we like to pick on it. We just came from Nashville, Tennessee. We did some analysis there. And this is their map. You can see downtown clearly here for the county. And zooming into just the city limits. Oh, sorry. One of the things that we tried, sorry, I just forgot about this slide. There's a mapping form out there called cartogramming. And you shape the value of the information based on its power. So in this case, this is electrical usage in the United States in 1921. So this is the #1 power consumer, and Wisconsin's number 10. So Wisconsin's 1/10 the size of New York. You get it? So we went ahead and took their map to the next level. We said, okay, so here's their map, and let's cartogram it to see what downtown feels like for the county. So putting them side by side, you can really see this is downtown's land area in true sense. That's how it feels financially for the entire county. That's for the county. That's a 580 square mile area. Zooming into just the downtown part and doing the same thing, this is how it feels in the city limits. So that land area has like a 15-to-1 ratio return of potency to the city limits. Did y'all get this? So this is its 3D model. Tennessee actually had more powerful retail taxes as well. This is looking at the model on the side view, and we turned it into a heart monitor. We thought that was fun. See what its pulse is. They're pulling about $191 million an acre at the center of their downtown. From a retail perspective, this is the land area of downtown, and this is the whole rest of the county. That's how much retail taxes their downtown produces, and this is the rest of the county. The downtown has no shopping mall. It's just little mom and pop shops. And it was really funny. This was eye-opening to me because they have a spectacular mall next to this really wealthy community. And we're all trying to figure out how their downtown's doing so well. And one of the downtown board of directors said to me, well, my daughter goes to the mall once a month and she drops $150 every month. And I said, well, you eat out at lunch. How often a week? He's like, every day. So what do you spend at lunch? Like $10. And I said, what's 10 times 20? You know, so those little purchases add up. And that's just people eating lunch, buying a coffee, running an errand. All that stuff adds up. We just have to measure it and show what it is. So this is agnostic. That is what it is. And what's kind of crazy is this little building right here, the Wannabes Karaoke Bar, which is since now converted to the Tequila Cowboy. It's worth $9.6 million. It's on 0.05 acres. So if you had half an acre of this building, it would equal the property tax of this whole 52-acre mall. Did y'all get that? Just make things apples to apples so people can see the decisions they're making. This is not any high-rise. Everybody's got one of these in their town. So Winston-Salem, we did their model. What was obvious in Winston-Salem was it's one of the first settlements in North Carolina of the Moravians that settled there. They developed the Wachovia Bank, which is this building here. But they had an old settlement that looks like New England or something. This was an old tavern that's now a residential and an office on the ground floor, built in 1867. This is why you all should care as architects, by the way. So think about this. 0.5 acres of that building equals the 11-acre Kmart. Now, which of these, this one's been around since 1867, 150 years. Which one's going to be here 100 years from now? You know, as designers, we need to be starting to talk about adding value to our community and the importance of having community or value for our grandchildren. And we all know that's the buildings, right? There they are. So planners need to think about this too. This is one of my favorite cartoons from a kid's book from 1932. And you see that the planned city actually has some value to it. Planners need to be conscious of the real estate effects of what's going on and why policies shape our built environment. I'm going to give you a little bad example here. This is almost like the ghost of Christmas future. Now, luckily, you don't have the weird county issues that we have in the States. But Gwinnett County is one of my favorites. It's the poster child of sprawl. It's outside of Atlanta. And the whole time we were doing the analysis, they're just like, you don't understand. We're rural. We're not urban. We're 800,000 people in a 400 square mile county. And I'm just like, wow, that's pretty amazing. This is their map. Do y'all see something weird here? We looked at this and we're like, where the hell's their purple spot? We don't see a purple spot. We turned their model on its side and we're like looking for something to jump up, and we're just like, wow, it's just like a thick carpet. There's like nothing there. I mean, this is what we typically see. So this whole time they're like, no, we're rural. So here they are. This is Gwinnett County. They're 1,800 people per square mile. And so we had a bunch of other data, so we put it up here. Here's my county. We're 350 people per square mile. I think that's rural. And we're definitely less dense than they are. But what's kind of fascinating, they're less dense than DeKalb, which is the other part of Atlanta. But they're more dense by 200 people than Mecklenburg. And I said to them, I'm like, y'all are denser than Mecklenburg. What's in Mecklenburg? And they're like, Charlotte. So think about this. This is a county that's grown its development pattern, and it's it's more dense than Charlotte. When we look at their value, this is where they top out at $8 million an acre. This is my county at $46 million an acre. This is Chapel Hill, Greensboro, Raleigh, and there's Charlotte. All of these communities are less dense than that. Yet this property, or this county, has no downtown or has no city greater than 20,000 people. So somehow they haven't cultivated their wealth. So let's kind of compare them side by side. This is a county, the whole entire county of 130,000 people. So we have two main towns, actually three, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and Hillsborough. So 3 towns in the county. This is Syracuse, New York here, 400,000. So 100,000, 400,000, 800,000. And then these are their models and the value that they produce. And again, these are all conscious choices that they're making. They're not cultivating their wealth. They consciously chose not to build cities in Gwinnett County because they're not those kind of people. So to look at their core areas of where they have cultivated wealth, this is Chapel Hill, downtown Syracuse, and Sewanee, which is in Gwinnett. So I said to them, like, that's fine if you want to flatline, that's cool. Knock yourself out. So you're probably thinking, okay, does this work in Canada? We're doing work in Guelph. We're actually presenting it. I'm still in the process with it, but we're presenting it Tuesday. And this is the map for Guelph. So you can see downtown popping up here at over $60 million a hectare. You're seeing some of the commercial areas. This is the university in gray, which is non-taxable. But we'll go ahead and go to the 3D model because it's easier to see. So can you all see downtown? And what's crazy is they actually changed policy. They started developing, and then at some point in time, as they were doing suburban development, they tweaked their policies, and they said, okay, from here forward, we're not going to do anything less than 60 units an acre, period. We're going to have density. So you can see what happened. This is before that policy, and this is after it. So you see this jump from green to yellow, which represents a jump from 6 million a hectare to about 12 million a hectare. So doubling their money by doing that density limit. You can physically see the policy effect in the model. Y'all get that? I'm probably blocking you guys. I'm sorry about that. So there's their model. They peak out about here. What's also kind of cool is to pull their density, the people per kilometer. And here's Guelph. We have 1,400 people per kilometer. We put you in here. Y'all are kind of amazingly low density here. At about 500 people per square kilometer. This is my town's somewhere between Buffalo and Kitchener. So here's Toronto at about 4,000 people per kilometer. Syracuse, Buffalo, Kitchener, Windsor, Guelph, Chapel Hill, and Hamilton. So Guelph is a $17 billion corporation. It's worth more than all those hockey teams, right? Or if you want to localize it, it's about 14.75 Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, and I'll ask you, do you think the owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs knows what Phil Kessel's towel bill is in the locker room? Of course. So if they're making those kinds of financial decisions on their players, shouldn't you be understanding what the cost of a street is, the cost of a park is? Are you paying for it? Where's the revenue coming from? Are we selling enough seats? We do this in other businesses. So realize there's behavioral tricks that are going on inside development patterns that are steering the way that we develop, the choices that we make. The market is not free. The market is happening based on policies. So we didn't emerge from the savannah with tax policy. It's not genetic to us. In England, you were taxed on the number of windows you had, right? So we know the joker who put it in place, King William III. And for 100 years, the more windows you put in, the higher your taxes. Do you all remember studying Thomas Nash's architecture and seeing these buildings and going, why the hell are those windows boarded up? It was because people were avoiding paying taxes. They covered up the windows. Thomas Nash didn't initially design the building as blank windows like this. And that's the way, it's kind of phenomenal. Actually, there's another architect, this guy, Francois Mansart. Do y'all know the story of Francois? In Paris, you were taxed below your roof line. Anything at the roof line, the cornice, below that you were taxed. Francois came up with this crafty way of sticking stories up in the roof, hence the term mansard roof. When the tax assessor got out there, he's like, you can't tax me for this. This is clearly the roof, right? You know, we think that Paris was designed by the hand of one architect. It really was, the guy that figured out the loophole, right? Do y'all know this? Had to bring a little architecture into this. So we do analysis all the time, and we find weird things all over the place. This is Cheyenne, Wyoming. This actually is a standard in most communities, that you have value of the dirt and then value of the building on top of the dirt, right? So we can go in with the computer, just eliminate buildings, look at the dirt value per acre. This is a map of the dirt value per acre. You see low value per acre and high value per acre for just the dirt. Now, as you all practice living in a community, you would expect, as taxpayers, that everybody in your neighborhood is about the same value for the dirt that you paid, right? And taxes, look at these outliers up here that are clearly, what is that, like 10 times the value? But let's put that aside for a second. As I was presenting in Cheyenne, Wyoming, I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Where this one right here is blue, that's like $15,000 an acre. As soon as you cross the street, it jumps up to $35,000 an acre. Just by crossing the street, the land value doubles on a per acre, per square foot, per whatever basis. Why does it double? And the tax assessor was sitting in the front row, and she raises her hand. And she literally did this. It was hilarious. She's like, you don't understand. And I said, what don't I understand? She goes, well, the more land you have, the lower the value. Did y'all get that? I was like, wow, that's awesome, really? So if I've got 3/4 of a mile of a road here, 3/4 of a mile of road here, another half mile, I've got 3 miles of infrastructure. I've got the biggest site on the entire strip, which probably means I've got the biggest capacity. I can have the most stuff. If I have the most stuff, that means I've got the most trips for other people coming to the site. More trips means more car accidents. I probably have the most commerce going on, which probably means the most theft, which means more police calls. So I get more of your infrastructure. You're going to charge me less for it? And she's like, yeah, that's our standard. I'm like, where'd you get this standard? Did Moses deliver to you? I mean, can you not get rid of it? I presented this at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers. They thought this was hilarious. And I asked them, I'm like, where'd this come from? They're like, we don't know. And like, you should probably talk to Larry Clark. Larry probably knows where it came from. I'm like, really? So I went and talked to Larry. I'm like, Larry, does this make any sense? And he's like, no. We probably need to change that. This is how cities have been operating for over 100 years. You know, in addition to the dirt, I want you to think about architecture for a second. When we tax things on value, what's my incentive as a developer? My incentive is to do something dirt cheap. Not only to pay you less, but also to pay less in my continuing carrying costs on that property. I pay less taxes the cheaper and crappier the building I make, right? So this is my house again. And let's say, you know, Graham decides to move to North Carolina and he builds a Quonset hut. You know, this is how the assessor is going to value the properties. The assessor is going to go out there and go, well, that's a dirt cheap building to build. And there's only 2 people in North Carolina crazy enough to do that, Graham and this guy, Bill. And so it's a limited market. Now, Graham can have 10 kids. He can do it home occupation and have UPS trucks showing up every single day. And at the end of the day, his tax bill is going to be $330, and I'm paying $1,200. When you look at the suburban environment, the reason why the development experience has turned this way for the last 50 years is the financial markets have figured out how to take advantage of our policies. Y'all get this? So they're essentially incentivized to build junk. So that's what I want you to take as one of the final points, and realize that these aren't invisible market forces. These are policies that you can change, and they do affect you. You know, they affect your community, they affect your ability to pay for other things in your community. And just be conscious of it. And you can put the gun down too. And the other cool thing is, this is what our tax code looks like compared to your tax code. Like, you guys have so many more knobs and things you can do. And go take a look at Guelph. They're actually turning a lot of those knobs. They're doing some pretty cool stuff. And just be aware of your intake. We already measure these things in other parts of our life. If I know the fat content of my potato chips, I'm conscious of that. So measure your community cost, not just your revenue. And I was going to close with kicking my country around a little bit. And I actually love this quote that I thought was attributed to Winston Churchill. The United States can always be relied upon to do the right thing, having first exhausted all the possible alternatives. And incidentally, it's actually not his quote, and that's not actually the original quote. This is the original quote from Abba Eban that's been attributed to Winston Churchill. Men and nations behave wisely once they have exhausted all the alternatives. I think this is a brilliant statement, and it's incredibly true. And as you all consider your political office, be aware of this. What are the options that we're doing as a community, and how have they affected our world? So with that, I just want to advocate doing the math and helping your community through that process. Thank you. We're going to be... Thank you. You can stop now. Stop. We're going to be setting up a table up here, and while that table's going, if I can have maybe a couple quick questions to answer before we get into is that okay? Before we get into the panel? Does anybody want to shoot anything up at me? We got somebody in the back there?
More in the old city, even like encompassing Ancaster and Stony Creek, rather than, because I know Amalgamated Hamilton is a largely rural municipality.
Yeah.
So I think that our density is probably a little skewed there on your slide. So I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. I think it's something worth considering as we move forward. Because if you look at that, we look like, basically we look like Halton Hills, not Hamilton.
Sure, and I think that's maybe something to consider, is since that agglomeration of all those, when you all came together as several municipalities into one pile like that, that's a great point. And our data didn't grab that because we just grabbed your full boundary, but that would be the next thing to get into. But also weighing out what those different parts are doing from a cash flow standpoint. Not only just looking at the whole pie, but how does each individual bucket work too? But I think that'd be very helpful for people.
Are you saying that by being dense downtown,
The question is, by being dense downtown, you're making more money? Tax-wise, yes. It's in our data, in our research, that's what it shows. But there's, downtowns are always in different states of being. Some downtowns are better off than others. So it depends on and you see this just crossing from like just different parts of James Street. Sir? Yeah, the question is, are you seeing different returns around mass transit? That depends on the market. There's a study we're doing in Charlotte. Charlotte did a South Rail Line transit line that's a light rail. They call it the Blue Line. And we did a three-dimensional model, and you see these little mountains popping up in and around the. It's kind of interesting because they're actually considering a north train line extension, and because the politics changed, the mayor that got the first train line done has somehow turned into a different animal now that he's governor. He's actually fighting the North Line extension after he got the South Line extension done. It's just really weird. It's North Carolina. But they're trying to demonstrate that that's the value effect that could happen in the front. If we do we saw it here, it's likely to happen here. But in the political environment of North Carolina at this moment, they won't let you think that way for some reason. I don't know. But that's what we see. In a lot of other municipalities where we do see high-frequency mass transit, there's individuals that choose that. And just one last close, because we're going to get back up here. When I was presenting that data in Gwinnett County, one of the counselors that was in the audience kept on saying to me, she's like, no, but you don't understand. Why do you keep on saying density, stuff like that? That's not who we are. we're not urban people. And I said, they've been saying that the whole time we were doing the study, and I said, okay, ma'am, you've been saying that all throughout the whole entire study. That's maybe not who you are, but the National Board of Realtors says that 30% of your market would make that choice. And let's just assume the National Board of Realtors doesn't understand real estate. Let's assume they're 200% wrong. What's 10% of 800,000 people? And she said 80,000 people. And I said, Gwinnett County should at least have an Asheville. You should at least have my community here. So what was happening is the decision makers were making decisions based on who they were and not necessarily about the diversity of their community. And they missed that. It's an opportunity missed. So that's my final point, and we're going to get into the questions. Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to the mayoral panel. At first, I'd like to introduce to you Laura Babcock. Laura Babcock, most of you probably know her, but she is the president of the Power Group Communications. The Power Group. And she's moderated debates at a variety of different political arenas, and so we are happy to have her here with us tonight to help us moderate our panel. So please welcome Laura. And our first mayoral candidate tonight is Ijaz Butt. Do you want to just go sit at the far left there? Next we have Michael Baldessaro. And Brad Clark. Mr. Eisenberger, Fred Eisenberger. Crystal Levine. And finally, Brian McCaddy. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Laura Babcock. And I hope we have a good show.
Perfect, thank you. How fantastic was that presentation, eh? Didn't you guys love that? Loved it. And I have to tell you, the discussion on Twitter was already going strong. A lot of good ideas are already out there and people are debating them. So that's the kind of night we want to have tonight. I've been asked to come here tonight to make sure that we get some of the rules followed in our discussion here, keep everybody on the same page. We want to have some fun. But this is really, if you think about it, the first time we're having this crop of mayoral candidates get up on stage together. And this is being live streamed by Joey Coleman. Thanks a lot, Joey. And I know other media is already here. Thanks, Joey. I've had a lot of people on social media tell me how thankful they are that they're able to watch this from their homes, and they're commenting on it already. So we have a very large audience for this tonight. And these candidates, I want to first of all say, and I think I say this at most debates that I moderate, it's easy to be kind of the armchair critic. I get to go on TV and criticize a lot, but it's quite another thing to put your name on the ballot, to stand up or sit in front of people, put your ideas out there for debate and critique. So I just want to have a round of applause for these candidates who have stepped up. Okay, great. And we're going to have Joe join us up here too, because we want his answer on the first question that all these candidates are going to get. So they're up here tonight. They're here to have a respectful discussion about the first question. They've all been sent one from Graham. They've had some time to think about it. This is not a catch-you kind of environment here. We want to make sure we get a really good answer from them. So they're each going to have 5 minutes. We'll do it alphabetically. And they're going to take that 5 minutes. Graham is actually going to watch the clock. And if they're going over, of course, I'm going to stop them. And they're just going to go across like that, respectfully listen to each other. We'll hear all of their first answers. After that, this is where things get a little bit tricky, but fun. And this is the audience participation time. So the way it's going to work, I believe, Graham, you're going to have a walk-around mic for this. So there's 2 walk-around mics. So there you go. Thank you. So you're going to want to identify yourself, have the person with the walk-up mic come close to you to be ready to pose your question. So as Graham said, I've had a lot of experience with this, and usually if anything goes wrong, it's usually during the open Q&A. Here's a couple of things that'll make it go really well. Just be aware that there's probably a lot of people who want to ask a question. Plan your question in advance so it's nice and succinct. This isn't really a time or a place to make a big platform speech of your own. It's more about asking them what they think. So make your question succinct. Then the person that you ask will get about a minute or so, reasonable time to answer it. And the other people up here on the dais can kind of talk back and forth a little bit. If it starts to get, off topic or in any way abusive, then I'm going to just stop that particular question and go to the next one from the audience. So as long as we're asking nice, respectful, succinct questions and all the candidates up here abide by that, we should have a really fun time and most importantly, get a lot of good information out for all of us here and all the people watching at home. Okay? So with that being said, I already see he's got a 5 o'clock or 5 minutes on the timer here. So I believe we're going to start over there with Ijaz. And they've all been sent this question in advance. So I'm going to read it for you just as a reminder, sir. So we'll go, Ijaz, you're up first. Look how cordial everybody is. I love it. Okay. Here's the question. I'll ask it for each candidate just so that they have it fresh before their answer. How would you, as mayor of Hamilton, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that the future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you would like to undertake and when. And Ijaz, you're on the clock. Go ahead, sir. Speak into your microphone, please.
Well, first I will introduce you. My name Ijaz Butt, and I'm sure you heard this name on the Jimmy Kimmel show. You made a lot of fun about it. And personally, I liked it, and I was very thankful to him because the kind of advertisement he gave it to me, I even spent $1 million, I can't get it. So I was very happy that one day I filed the paper and the next day I got it. As far as the city is concerned, my first object is the accountability and the transparency. And this, because what I feel that the accountability simply what is being responsible for one's actions, words, and behavior. It is maintaining the great trust that the public places upon you and being ready to face the consequences of any decision you make or action you take, especially when the outcome is one of that is not desired or expected. It is holding yourself above all the high standard of moral and ethical and the legal conduct. I think presently what we are getting into a problem that our elected regulatory body is lacking in the accountability and the transparency. I was the president of the Muslim Association when I took over $130,000 worth of debts and $6,000 in the account, and they wanted to build a mosque for $3.9 million. Where this project was, it was completely unfeasible project.
Ijaz, can I just stop you? You're right at half your time, and I know there's a question the audience is really wanting to hear your specific answer to. So I just want to advise you, you might want to get to the question that's been posed while you have 2 minutes remaining. Okay?
Well, I think for the taxes, we have to be very open, whether we are councillors or the mayors and the people who are working in the city. The whole system should be a transparent system. And because the transparency starts from the bottom, you cannot make accountable a person who's working in the front line if you are not up to that standard. So what you have to do is first you have to bring those standards up by yourself, and then you go from top to bottom, and you can see how it will affect our taxes. So there are more mismanagement in it, and that has to be controlled. And first, I think is we are already overpaid taxes, which has to be brought it down. And I was the person who was completely against the amalgamation. I wanted to have an amalgamation in a different way, by city, not all of a sudden 6 municipalities to put on the Hamilton city and raised our taxes right up to the top. If we have done it simultaneously, one municipality, and stayed with it 5 years, then we calculated that how far we have gone. Then after 5 years, if we see that we have developed something there, we have provided all the services over there, our taxes would have never gone up. Now you got a suburban areas, urban area, the people are living far, you have to make the roads for them, and there is infrastructure you have to build it, you have to raise the taxes to provide all those services. So what I feel is, if I'm elected, the first thing I will ask for the referendum for all the 6 municipalities if they want to stay with us or they want to, separate from us. So my main intention is to bring the taxes down by providing all the essential services to the people which they require.
Okay, thank you. You're just at your time. Thank you very much. Round of applause for you, Jess. Thank you. Michael, I'll pose the question to you, sir. It's the same question, just for your memory's sake. How would you, as Mayor of Hamilton, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you would undertake and when. And your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. Good day. First of all, I've always been against urban sprawl.
Into the mic, please. Michael, take it from you, Jazz. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I've been running for mayor since 1985, and I've always been against urban sprawl. I've built several of the subdivisions on the mountain, the entire west campus of McMaster University, and my father built the Kenilworth Cut, so I do know something about infrastructure. We have to be charging more for new development, and I see that the city's doing that. And as an outsider inside the city, I look at the downtown, and I'd watch them tear down the downtown and put in Jackson Square. And now they've really put a nice bus section in there. And what I see is the people are coming from Toronto because it's more economical to live in Hamilton for them. And we're putting in a GO station for that. Now, I'm all for the LRT, and this is, I guess that would be almost number 1 for me, or 2 or 3. Because if we're going to have future development, we have to include everybody, Stony Creek, Flamborough, everybody that's a part of Hamilton now. Our buses can easily run east and west. Hamilton runs east and west. We need an LRT that goes, we could start from downtown, which is really what this is all about, right at Jackson Square, and go to the University Hospital and tie the university into all the money that the city's now spending, or that the university's spending medically in the downtown Hamilton. Then we're going to have a loop that takes people with the LRT down to the Bay and down to the new GO station and back downtown. And then we're going to also have to somehow go up the mountain, and we're going to have stations where people can park cars. We can't get rid of cars. We go to school because we want a car rear. In other words, most of the males want to buy a car. I know I did. Now it's finally women have come of age and they got their right, and they feel the same way we do. Trouble is we're running out of fuel. So in any event, that's really, but That is important. That's why to have the infrastructure, people have to be able to get around. You can't bring all these people in from Toronto and other places and put them in the Connaught new developments and expect them all to go to the General and to St. Joe's. We have the McMaster, we have the university, and these are selling features of the city, bring a lot of money. So that's the first thing that I would do. We got to move the jail. And I've spent a bit of time there myself. And I'll tell you, Hamilton's jail is far, far superior than anything I've been around. I've done the tour. And it's very important, but please, you go downtown, and I got one question. Anybody got any spare change? I'm getting tired of being asked because I don't know. I don't have any spare change. So the answer is no. We have some obstacles to correct downtown. One of the things would be, let's get the bicycles off the sidewalks. They don't even ring the bell anymore. They go zipping by you, and that's electric bikes. So what I would say to the police or somebody is, let's start upholding the Highway Traffic Act. Those roads are made for cars and people that know how to use those roads. Children shouldn't be on those roads, and those that are should have licenses on their bikes, as I did when I was a child, and they should have passed some kind of test and should maybe be 14 or 15 years of age, because there they are amongst the motorists. And now I'm not quite happy. We have a bus lane downtown, which is, you might as well use it as a pedestrian mall, because the buses don't seem to be in it. They just go zipped and flying through. So there's a lot of things we have to change. We have a deficit of over $1 trillion. $600 million of that belongs to the federal government. We have an infrastructure deficit here. As far as I'm concerned, we cannot afford to build anywhere but within the existing boundaries. It has to stop. If you feel like I do, I'm a mushroom. I'm on a mushroom farm. And they keep me in the dark, and you know what they're feeding me. And that's just the way I feel about it. But we can stop that. Hopefully, I don't understand why it hasn't been stopped 20 years ago, because what these architects are talking about is right on. You can see how much money you make by having some condensing. We've got a big enough city. It's so big, and we've got farms. What are you going to do when we have to grow food and it's all urban houses, people with big lots? So, in any event, that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Great.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks. Thank you. Like you said, you've done these debates before, Michael. You're right on time, so thank you. Okay, our next question goes to Brad. Brad, this is again the same wording, but I'm going to just do it for our audience and those joining us at home. How would you, as Mayor of Hamilton, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that the future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you would undertake and when. And your 5 minutes starts now, Brad.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you everyone for attending this evening. This is kind of right up my alley. I've spent the last 2 terms as chair of the Development Charge Review Subcommittee, which has been looking at these fees themselves and slowly moving the city in a direction where we're getting full cost recovery for both the hard services and the soft services. So the city has moved forward in some very dramatic ways. One of the things as a result of that, and it pretty much proves what Joe said tonight, we did a study just in downtown Hamilton on the stormwater costs that the developers are paying to develop in downtown Hamilton. And we learned that the stormwater costs that are being charged are about $300 more per unit than is required because of the infrastructure that already exists. And so that's a very recent report that shows very clearly what Joe's talking about, and that $300 could be taken off of those DCs for stormwater in downtown Hamilton, which makes it more advantageous per unit, $300 per unit for the developers, and it becomes a bit of an incentive. But we're not finished there, and one of the things that we had requested was that we look at the actual engineering studies of the hard services and the soft services. We have combined sewers in downtown Hamilton, so we need to really understand very clearly what the costs are from an engineering standpoint so that we can actually back out. And that's what we do with the DC review. So from my perspective, I really do believe that we can develop special policy areas for DC costing that is actually informed by these financial statements. And this will really demonstrate to the public, but more importantly, provide those incentives that we can change the DC structure for downtown Hamilton, and for that matter, the outlying downtowns also, so that you're not paying for something that's already in the ground. And that's the key that I think is important. And that provides significant incentive to develop those items. We also need to look at, and we've tried for a long time on brownfield development, but we need to really begin a strong push on the brownfield development and lower the industrial DCs for the brownfields. We have a very competitive industrial development charge. It's $11.78, and it's subsidized by the city. We need to switch that around a little bit in terms of greenfield versus the brownfield, and provide incentives so that people will come in and the developers will look and say, okay, if I'm doing this fiscal accounting and you're providing me this subsidy here, it helps to offset the cost to remediate as well as the erase grant. And that would assist us in terms of bringing in industry and factories into the city itself. The other item that I think is really important is twofold. One, we need to ensure that the incentives are across the entire city for all of the downtowns, but more importantly, we need to educate the suburban voters as to why those subsidies are so vitally important in the downtown. And if we could have this presentation to every taxpayer in the city of Hamilton, it would really enlighten them significantly about the fact that if we intensify, we end up developing significant economic growth for the city, and the land itself, the value goes up in those areas, and then we wouldn't need to develop as much in the greenfield. So I hear frequently, as I've been knocking on doors and talking to people, that the suburbs are concerned about all the money going into the downtown. They don't really understand the economics because, quite candidly, we've not done a good job of explaining those economics. And without that support and without the city coming together with some unified vision, we're not going to get there. So we need to make sure that they're informed, as well as the folks who live in the downtown communities. I think that's
you're
close.
right at 5 minutes. Thanks, Fred. Fred, here's the question again. How would you, as Mayor of Hamilton, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that the future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you would undertake and when. Your 5 minutes starts now, Fred.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you for the Architects Society for pulling this together. I think it's always informative when we can have a healthy debate on some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with into the future, and I'm really delighted to be here to do that. You know what, a number of years ago we developed a nodes and corridor approach in terms of growth, and I think that's a critically important piece to ensure that we're actually developing in areas where we want to develop and where it makes sense and where it's on existing infrastructure. I think that's the critical piece for us, is to make sure that we utilize and maximize the value of our existing infrastructure as much as humanly possible. And when we talk about intensification, in my view, it's not, and I think there's a common misconception that it's 20 or 30-story buildings. In fact, intensification for Hamilton would be 4- and 5-story buildings, medium-rise, that actually would provide a better quality of place, it's also more efficient from a construction perspective in terms of the efficiencies of the building, and really creates the kind of revenue bump that actually has value for the city going forward. But on very specifics, what I would do directly, and I think one of the very big challenges is our economic or commercial industrial tax base has been decimated over the last 30 or 40 years. One of the greatest revenue opportunities that we have to rebalance our tax structure, which is now at about 85% residential and about 15% commercial, is to put a really strong focus on economic development and jobs and finding those new businesses that will provide jobs into the future. And that really means looking at our brownfields and our current employment lands and finding opportunities to put in there, which would then increase our commercial industrial tax base. So that's one specific area that I think needs continued and ongoing focus, and certainly was a focus for me before. It will be a focus for me again. Secondly, the intensification through a variable development charge. And I think we really need to have a look at providing incentives for the things we want and disincentives for the things we don't want. And I think what we want in our communities, we want infill projects with some density attached to them. We want to fill up those empty spaces that are parking lots with some density attached to them. We want to do that all over the city, in fact. So I would recommend a variable development charge that would be infilling anywhere in our city, whether it's in Stony Creek or in Flamborough or Waterdown. All the nodes and corridors that we've already identified as opportunities for investment we should look at from a variable development charge basis and provide incentives for the kinds of development we want to have. And lastly, and this is probably one that's going to generate some debate, is the very economic value of public transportation and specifically LRT. One of the hallmarks of LRT, depending on where it is, in Charlotte, North Carolina was brought up. I visited that location. They had a long journey to get there, but the reality is that they're seeing the economic uplift as a result of that investment significantly these days. And that's really the bigger value for LRT, is what kind of investment comes, what kind of new residential comes, what kind of commercial comes as a result of a fixed rail line along a particular corridor. That's the biggest value for our community. Having said that, I'm also well aware that over the last 4 years, there really hasn't been enough information sharing with our broader community for the majority of our community to understand what the value is. We've heard a lot about cost. We hear often about $1 billion, $1 billion, $1 billion, but we don't hear about the return on investment. And there clearly is a return on investment over the long term for LRT. What I'm suggesting, but I know that a vast amount of people in our community don't have enough information to make that kind of an informed decision. So notwithstanding the fact that I support it and I believe it's good for our community, and I think Council has had unanimous support for that, and Brian's led the charge, I think we need to have a civic engagement process in our broader community, bring people from all parts of our community to the table, let them educate themselves and the broader community all at the same time, let them bring in the media, and let's inform our entire community so we can have a chance of getting an enhanced public transportation system in place. So I'm actually challenging our current council to actually do that now. Don't wait 6 months, don't wait 7 months, do it now. Let's get an engagement process going. Let's get our broader community input. Civic engagement matters, and I think LRT matters in our community.
Thank you, that's time. Crystal, here's the question for you. How would you, as Mayor of Hamilton, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that the future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you would undertake and when. 5 minutes is on the clock, Crystal. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me here. I'm a little nervous. It's my first time speaking in front of so many people, so forgive me. First of all, I'd like to address our downtown core, and we need to stop dedicating everything as heritage buildings. And when we do that, we can start incorporating new buildings into the downtown and building up in our downtown. It's important that we are sensitive to some of our heritage buildings, but we need to understand that not everything needs to be dedicated to heritage. That way we can start growing and developing as a city down there. We also have the amalgamated city, and with the amalgamated city, that means we have kind of several downtown cores, if I will, that we have room to build up in instead of just out in. I really do not like the urban sprawl. I don't like seeing it in my neighborhood, and the costs for the urban sprawl are skyrocketing on our tax dollars that we can't afford as citizens. I agree with both Clark and Eisenberger on the brownfields. It's one of the things that I have in my notes that I'm scared to look at. But I would like to propose something a little different with them. If we want to build up on some of these areas, we need to give huge incentives for the people coming into them. We don't know what all of our brownfields, what they're contaminated with. For the city to do the testing on that would cost us a huge amount of dollars. And there's developers that would probably come in and use these if the incentives were right. And both my counterparts here, they didn't mention specifics when it came to incentives. And I would go as far as maybe allowing the developers to come in, whether it's commercial or residential, depending on the area and what it's for, give them these brownfields. Let them clean up. We'll give them to you because at the end of it all, we're going to reap sooner tax dollars off of it than waiting for somebody to come in and buy these brownfields. It's not going to happen as quickly as we'd like. I think I'd like to touch on the LRT quickly, where I do disagree with a couple of the panelists up here. I think to congest our downtown further with an LRT would be a grave mistake. The other day I was downtown, I was driving through the core. It took me 13 minutes to get from Wellington to James because it was so congested with the bus lane. I couldn't imagine an LRT being thrown in there too. I think we need to start worrying more about the north and south routes in our city because our demographics are changing and they're constantly changing. And that's where I had already put out there the proposal for the gondolas. If we're going to build our city, we need to build neighborhoods within our city and then build out into communities and wards in the city as a whole. We need to address the citizens more directly. It's amazing that if councillors would actually get out to the citizens more in their wards and in their neighborhoods, we actually, and as citizens, we have very valid points and opinions. We know what we need in our wards first before we address our wants, and I think that's very important for us to do. I lost my train of thought. I should have kept my notes up.
You still have 2 minutes, Crystal.
I do, that's great. 2 minutes to read, right? My chicken scratch.
Whatever you like.
I think another thing we need to do is pull back a lot of the red tape. We have it where if a developer comes in and they want to rezone something, it's going through hoops and bounds and leaps and everything to get them to come in. They have amazing ideas. Most of them, look at what we've seen today with some of the development that they showed us in various cities. They have amazing ideas. They're the ones that we need to be reaching out to say, hey, what can you help us do in our city to grow it up instead of what can you do in our city to help us save our tax dollars? What can you do in our city to beautify it and condense it all at the same time? We need neighborhoods that work together. Certainly closing all the schools in our neighborhood isn't working together. We're not building livable communities, walkable communities. We're not building the sense of community that we want. We want a little bit of green space in each of our communities. Expand our gardens in our communities, the vegetable gardens and stuff that we have. They're an amazing thing to have. And if we can build a sense of community in each of our neighborhoods, we'll grow faster and easier as a city.
Okay, thank you. Brian, here's the question for you. How would you, as Mayor of Hamilton, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that the future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you would undertake and when. Your 5 minutes is on the clock.
Thanks very much, Laura. I think this is really about choices we make as a city, and I think what we're talking about tonight is smarter growth, trying to find ways to do things more efficiently, with limited resources we have as a city. So the first thing as mayor I would do is prioritize the locations and the opportunities we have in a couple of different ways. We need to prioritize areas that can produce high number of units per hectare. A way to invest in those areas to move that forward. The second would be the areas we can produce the most number of jobs per hectare as well. And to incent that is to direct city investments with the return on investment and the city resources going into those areas. And let me give you a couple of examples of those. McMaster Innovation Park, who I think most of you know, is in the West End along Longwood Road. And that's an area that is producing all sorts of new jobs and producing all sorts of new investments for Hamilton. And it's in a very limited footprint. And if you look at the number of jobs per hectare in that area compared to the jobs per hectare in some of the business parks, you can see where that makes a much better investment. That's the opportunity for us to invest more in places like the McMaster Innovation Park than we do in areas that are more on the edges of the city. The downtowns were evident, writ large in Joe's presentation with his graphics. And I say downtowns plural because we know a lot about downtown Hamilton. And the slides that Joe showed in terms of the investment to take those older buildings and invest in those buildings to restore them. In our case with the downtown incentive programs, the grants and the loan programs, targeting that city investment produces a huge change in the property values and therefore the property taxes that are coming in from those same buildings once they're restored. And that's certainly the case for downtown Hamilton, but it's also the case for downtown Stony Creek, Dundas, Ancaster, and other parts of our city with the same opportunity to restore some of those older buildings and to see that huge uplift in property taxes. The waterfront is obviously another area to invest in where there's a huge return on investment along Piers 5 through 8 through the Barton Tiffany area where we perhaps should have put the stadium. Fred and I agreed on that. And then to look at the transportation investments, which is also our work as a city in the province of Ontario, to support the high units and the high jobs per hectare. The second area I wanted to talk about is development charges. It's been touched on tonight. A couple of years ago, we had a fantastic speaker in town, Dr. Pamela Blay from Ryerson University. She wrote a book called Perverse Subsidies, and perverse subsidies were development charges she was talking about. And that they don't really cover the true costs of development. And they certainly, if you have one development charge for the whole city, it certainly doesn't recognize the differences in costs involved in developing in different parts of the city. They're radically different. Right now, we've got 0 development charges in the downtown, whereas just outside of the downtown, in the Durand neighborhood, the development charges go up like this, just right across the street. So it doesn't cost 0 to develop downtown. There is a cost to developing in downtown. It's significantly different than in the edge of the city, the southern edges of the city. We need differential development charges for each of those areas to recognize the true cost of development. And we're not seeing that so far in the development charges committee that we have at the city. I'm hoping we'll see that in the next couple of months. Lastly, the province of Ontario has given us job density targets and population targets as well. The 40% intensification places to grow asks us to come forward with. We're about 25% on that target right now versus the 40% target. We have a huge opportunity in the lower city in particular that's been depopulated by about 40,000 people in the last 30 years as people moved to the mountain and moved elsewhere. Huge opportunity to repopulate the lower city, and that's where the light rail transit system is going along King Street, that 800-meter area of influence for redevelopment. 80 to 100 projects, the report from Canadian Urban Institute suggests is possible there. We need much higher jobs per hectare targets in the airport growth district area. We're now with the OMB decision, but the jobs per hectare target is much too low,
Brian.
and we need to increase that. So
Thanks,
those
Brian.
are the smart investments. Thanks,
Thanks
Laura.
very much. Thank you to all of our panelists. You know, we thought it would be fun and maybe a little bit different since we do have an expert here with us tonight on this very topic. If I pose the question to you, Joe, not as the mayor, but a recommendation to our mayor, would you be able to answer it for us? He's had a chance to tour around, been spending some time with some of the architects in town, so it'll be fun to see what he has to say vis-a-vis what we've just heard. So I'll give you the question, Joe, and you can answer it, and I'll even give you 5 minutes, okay? How would you, if you were making a recommendation to the Mayor of Hamilton, could be one of the people next to you, change the current city policies and fee structures regulating new development, redirect city resources, and work with citizens to ensure that the future development will reduce our per capita infrastructure costs and collective tax burden across the city? Please describe the 3 most important changes or initiatives you think the mayor should make and when they would do it. Okay, Joe? Thank you.
Thank you, and it's a little uncomfortable being an expert on my 7 hours that I've spent in your community. So that qualifies me for running for mayor. It's interesting traveling all these different places and seeing the different communities and seeing a lot of things that are similar and a lot of things that are different. And one of the things that I'm blown away with, particularly, just as different countries, is how facile you are with talking about this stuff. Just regular people in the street. Now, maybe Graham's kind of putting me in front of the right people, I don't know, but hearing this dialogue and the conversations you're having, and then knowing about the knuckle fights that I have in my community. And all politics is local, but ours seems to be incredibly brutal compared to what I'm seeing here. So one of the things that always comes into my mind is the saying, count your blessings, or carve your blessings in stone and write your failures in sand. You're dealing with things that are much more complex here than a lot of communities. You've had an annexation issue that was put upon you by your state that's fairly unique. But that's something that you have to live with, and that makes your community unique. I like the idea of the multiple downtowns. You have that. That's different from a lot of communities. They don't necessarily have that. So how can you build on your assets of your community and realize that you have this differentiation? With that, I would recommend start with a body mass index or something. What's your baseline of what you have today? What works? What doesn't? And then you're going to have a literacy campaign. Now, luckily, your country as a whole tends to be more socially minded about this social corporation that you all are vying for being a CEO for. We have this strange concept once you cross the border that somehow we're running around like free people, completely detached from our taxation responsibilities. Ironically, our country was founded on a tax revolt. So you'd think that we'd understand that, but we don't. And I think that's the thing that's really disheartening, is that we can't even have this kind of conversation in our community. With that, I like the ideas that I've been hearing about the taking a roadshow out to the community and having some sort of education process. That's incredibly important, and that's something I wish more communities would even talk about. You also have, from a blessing standpoint, those dials and knobs that you all have. You have so many more controls on your own systems here than we can even fathom. It's illegal in the state of North Carolina to get the retail tax data. 100% illegal. I have to guesstimate based on what I'm seeing in other states. And that kind of juvenile approach to running governments makes things really difficult in my community. In fact, if you want to have some fun, my state took our water system away. Just came and take it, didn't even pay us for it, and gave it away. Then we complained about that. They took our airport. Then they made a special state law that we're not allowed to annex anything. So it's if you all, again, count your blessings, come down and visit North Carolina every once in a while, and you'll get a nice scare for your government. So I'm just going to stop kind of halfway, if you don't mind, because I want to respect the fact that you all are doing something that I could never imagine doing, and it takes a lot of guts to step up and take some leadership. And I wish more people in every community would participate, either by running for office, being on a boards or committee, or do something to help. It's not, education of your community is not something just your mayor alone can do. It's going to take all of you all. It's going to take everybody helping a little bit. This is a big social corporation that you're in, that you're all part of, whether you like it or not. And it's everybody's obligation to take part of it. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we put you on the spot, Joe, because your perspective is valuable. Even 7 hours in the city, it's great to hear that. I think Hamilton can put our blessings into stone more than maybe we do. So we really appreciate the perspective. We're freeing him, though, from the rest. This is just going to be about the candidates now. And in the spirit that Joe described our community and our country, the fact that we're able to have this great civil discourse on these important topics and we're all quite literate with it, let's go along in that vein. So there are obviously issues that may come up where we have a divergent opinion here in the audience, but we want to be very respectful, just as you were when we were listening to their 5 minutes, okay? In this particular debate, they don't have a closing argument or 2 minutes or anything like that, because it's more of a discussion forum than a debate per se. So what we're going to do, just as a reminder of the process here, is if you have a question that you'd like to pose, you can put your hand up, and there are some, if you just want to identify yourselves, our microphone support here, okay? You want to flag down one of these individuals with one of the mics, and flag me as well when you're ready for your question. Pose the question either to a single candidate up here on the dais or to the whole group. If you do it to a single candidate, that candidate will get a chance to answer for about a minute or so. Nice and succinct, okay? And then if other people on the dais want to question their response or platforms that don't bother with the puppy dog eyes if you think that you're being treated unfairly. I won't look at you for that. And also, I am not supporting anyone for mayor at all. I'm not endorsing anybody. I have no dog in this hunt, as they say, okay? What's that? Yeah, right. You didn't pay me enough, Brian. Okay. Yeah, that's right. See how it goes with the moderator on these things? Okay. So let's start with the questions from the audience. Are we all clear with the rules up here? Okay. I think we're going to get some great stuff covered. I'm told we have to just before 10 o'clock. We might not take all that time. Depends how many questions you have. But let's get started. I know I saw a hand up there. So do we have somebody? Okay, our first question, and please do us a favor. The people up on the stage can't see you at all, okay? So you need to let them know who you are, and then the question, who you're posing it to, so they can frame their response to it. Go ahead.
I didn't know I was asking to someone in particular. My name is Adrienne Havercroft. I live in Ward 2 in the Stinson neighborhood. And I guess I'm sort of addressing an issue that Brad Clark, you brought up in your answer. And it's the issue of I'm going to assume in this room that we are preaching to the converted a little bit and that we are all sold on this issue of needing to develop our downtown and to increase density for all of the reasons that had been said tonight. Unfortunately, in the larger city, that is not a, something that I think is widely understood, and you've addressed that as, a suburban councillor. And so my question, I guess to Brad, and if anyone else wants to answer this too, is, what do we do for people who may be under the misconception that investing in the downtown is unfair to suburban constituents? And I guess to follow that up as well is just to say, how do you continue to champion these issues even if they are unpopular with some people?
It's an excellent question. And I think it has to be a little bit more of a united front from the council. From time to time, Councillor McCaddy and folks around here who have heard different suburban councillors get on that podium where they say that the suburbs are paying too much to help the downtown. And I think we need to demonstrate to all of the community that Hamilton is ours. It's our city. We have 7 downtowns. We have put in place the same programs in all of the downtowns. So all of the communities are being treated equally. And we need to demonstrate more the actual return on investment for these different incentives. And when you do that, it's really quite surprising. So I think it needs to come from the community. It needs to come from, obviously, councillors and elected officials, our staff, the media, and everyone pointing out what the real benefit is for intensifying and in this case, really redeveloping downtown Hamilton, downtown Stony Creek, and around the community.
Just here about a minute. Brian's indicating he'd like to say something. Fred? Okay, Fred. You got the mic. You go first, Fred.
So I'm with respect, I mean, I think there is a difference between what happens to downtown Hamilton and what happens in other downtowns in our community. And I think it's probably high time that we address that. And when we're talking about a variable rate development charge, that's essentially what you would end up doing is providing incentives across the board wherever there is an opportunity to create infill and higher density. I think that's kind of the topic of the day. But in fairness, I think at some point we have to think about, do we need to continue to have zero development charges in the core, which is kind of where we are right at the moment, and actually we in fact don't have application fees in most instances in a particular area in the core. And so you would wonder at some point that maybe you either offer that to all the core areas in terms of giving them an opportunity to redensify and create that higher density opportunity, or do you at some point think about how do you eliminate that in the core and start looking at other opportunities that actually balances that out a little better?
Okay,
But I think education and information is important.
Okay, let's go to Brian. Brian asked next. Anyone else want to go on this after? Michael? Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Thanks very much. I think it's important to remember the slides we saw tonight where the property value of some of those buildings downtown that in the situation, Joe's situation, went from an extremely low value with low property values, producing or almost no property taxes, to the investment that went in, and in our case, it's the downtown grants and the downtown incentives that raises that property value by orders of magnitude, 10 times plus. And the property taxes we receive from that property is all of a sudden 10 times what it used to be. And the same thing goes for other investments that we would make. I'll raise LRT just because we've got the data on it, that there are parts of Hamilton east of the downtown where they're actually, the property values are not rising very quickly at all. And they're not paying nearly as much tax as other parts of the city. So I would say to folks on the mountain or folks to other areas, say the heck with the downtown, the heck with the lower city. It's in your own personal interest to see that investment happen. The property values go up, the property taxes go up.
You can add to that later
and
the
property taxes will go down in your area.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, it seems the question is how do we engage everybody? We have 7 downtowns, but the heart of Hamilton is the downtown of Hamilton. And we are all together. We're not going to start the amalgamating at this late date. Now, to bring us all together, how about some referendums? Like, do we want fluoride? Do we want LRT? And some information to go with that. And how do you make people vote? Well, if you didn't vote, there's no OHIP, there's no pension, you've got nothing. You don't have to vote. You don't have to be part of society. I want everybody to vote. And I want to make it so everybody can easily vote.
Okay, is anyone else? Ijaz, you haven't put your hand up yet. I think Crystal had the mic first, and then you can go next.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to quickly address McCaddy with what he said. But I think there's a huge miscommunication aspect between the upper city and the lower city. We want to see, as an upper city, we want to see the downtown thrive. We want to see our cores thrive. We want to see it done correctly, though. What we see, and we do have a different vantage point because we don't live directly in your area. What we see, you mentioned that east of the downtown, their property values aren't going up. Do you know why? I can tell you why. We're doing great trying to intensify our downtown, but we're also pushing all the people that we didn't want in the downtown into the east end of our city. And you ask anybody that lives in the east end, and they're going to tell you, we now have more prostitutes in the east end. We now have more drug problems in the east end. We have all that bad getting pushed to the east. We want to see from Ward 7 and 8 and all the other wards up the mountain and from our outer communities, we want to see our downtown thrive. We want to see it done correctly, though. Thank you.
Okay, Ijaz?
Okay, about the downtown, we all know that most of the businesses are leaving, and none of the businesses is coming in. So in my agenda, I have given a plan that all those new businesses which create 20 jobs, specifically the manufacturing job, if they create 20 people's jobs, they should be exempted from the property taxes for 2 years. With this, any business, I have been involved in the business. The first 2 years of establishing a business, it is very hard. You don't even start the business, the tax started coming in. So if we give
It's up here to try to listen carefully to each other instead of talking between you, just so that we give each other maximum respect. Oh, Laura. Okay, who's next? I'm here. Go ahead, sir, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mitch Wilson. I think Joe's data was about as compelling as we're going to get for proving the benefits of high-density living. At the same time, as Andrea pointed out, we're preaching to the choir here. And I think everyone up on the stage can suspect that the LRT is nudging its way into being one of the prime contentious issues for the election. And a lot of, I guess, the talk or fear would be how you're going to fund it. And I'm wondering if someone up there would like to take the reins on explaining possible methods of funding the LRT, including tax incremental financing, and even the possibility of issuing a general municipal bond, a revenue bond.
Are you asking a specific candidate, or you said it's...
I'd like to start with Councillor McHattie and work it from there, please.
McHattie? Sure. So, Brian, you've got 1 minute or so. Go ahead.
Thanks for the question. We had Minister Murray, Transportation Minister Murray, here about 6 weeks ago now, and he was very clear that Hamilton should be looking at this idea of tax incremental financing, which really means looking at the development projects that would occur as a result of the LRT being in place in King Street in our case. 800 meters corridor, 400 meters either side of the King Street corridor. As those developments happen, capturing the property values, the uplift and the property taxes that come in, and using that as a method for the local funding of the LRT, the funding that I think the province is going to end up asking us to consider. I understand perhaps about 10% of the project with local dollars. We can also look at development charges, and the bonds idea is an interesting one. I'd need to look at the Municipal Act to see whether we have that opportunity. I know Premier Wynne is talking about green bonds at the provincial level.
So let me stop
so
you
that
there,
may be an
Brian,
opportunity.
because you're at a minute, and Fred's next on this. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I really do believe that we need a kind of broader discussion on the whole issue of not only area rating on transit, which is coming up pretty soon, but the whole comparison between BRT, LRT, enhancing the existing system, and actually in comparison to that, the roads that we might need in terms of the growth that we're going to have in the future. And I think in the absence of that, I think the community at large really doesn't get the kind of evidence that we talk about, that we I happen to believe and understand. They really don't get what LRT is all about, and why should we spend $1 billion on anything like an LRT? We know why. I think the economic uplift is there, but I think we need to educate the community. So I really hope that we set in place a process that can actually educate the broader community about the benefits of public transportation and all the variables that surround it, so they can get a better understanding and we can get a better sense of where the community wants to go.
Okay, Fred,
in terms of funding,
hold on, you can get back to it.
we deserve 100% funding based on that from previous experience, but I can talk about that more later.
You can get back to it later, Fred. Anybody else on this panel want to speak? Crystal, you're next. Yeah. Crystal, and then Brad.
Okay.
We'll get to all of you. Let's just put it that way. Go ahead, Crystal.
Thanks so much. First of all, I'd like to say you funded or two, and but at the end of the day, it's never going to be enough. We already know this. We've heard this time and time again from council that something is going to cost X amount of dollars. We promise we're not going to go over it, and then us as taxpayers find out, oh gee, they just went over $1 million. Thanks a lot. Thanks, right? It's hard to talk when I know I've only got a minute.
I know. You got to be focused. You're almost there.
And I just want to say, I think we should be looking at overhauling our current system and overhauling our current routes. We need to get shorter buses in some cases, transportation vehicles.
I'll stop you there, Crystal. And as you guys can kind of tell just by the flow, these questions are big questions. You're probably all going to want to talk on them. So if you don't get something in, instead of trying to push past the time limit, just remember it, make a note, and you can add it in your next answer. We've got Brad next, and then you're next, Michael, and then Ijaz. Okay? Yeah, I think Brad had his hand up first.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Laura. Excellent question with regards to the financing of it. We still don't know exactly what the province expects from us. Even today in the budget, it was not in the budget, even though all indications were that it was going to be in the budget. Hamilton just developed an concern that there isn't a business case for LRT, and that's exactly what the province just requested from us today, is that we don't have a business case for the LRT. So, and the final one is the tax incremental financing.
Okay, let's pass it along.
Oh, we'll go back here.
No, I think it's Michael and Ijaz have their turn. Fred, there's, yeah, go ahead.
Like I said earlier, we have an infrastructure deficit. At the same time, if we're going to sell our downtown, we have to have transportation, and we have to start right in the center of the city. It's ridiculous to start anywhere else. And going to McMaster, that's a given. And hooking up so that the people that do want to fill the downtown, they're all going to be going to Toronto. That's why they're coming here. They're going somewhere else to work, and they want to live in the downtown. So we're going to find the money because we're going to make money. Because if we don't have that, what do we got for them? They don't want to get on the Queen E. They're trying to get down the Gardner. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Ijaz, go ahead.
Well, I am completely for the LRT. I will not make a lengthy speech. Simple is the 100% funding by the province and no taxes on the Hamiltonians. I do agree that the LRT is going to bring a lot of business into our cities that will create jobs and bring hundreds of dollars. Whereas the LRT will be used, so all the rapid buses, they can be moved up on the mountain where no service is provided. So I think this is the best solution. We don't want to take any more taxes. I am here to give the tax relief. I'm not there to get the more taxes from the people, those who are living here. So this is my thoughts, sir. And I think the councillors have already made the decision for the 100% funding, and I do stand
I'll
with
wrap
that.
you up there, Ijaz. Thank you on that question. Just if you're coming up to the microphone or if you're here on the dais, there's an expression in TV, don't eat the mic. So if you go too close like this, we really can't hear what you're saying, okay? So a reminder to the audience as well. Do we have another question in the audience? At the back, there's somebody? Okay, yeah, go ahead, please, sir. And please identify yourself and who you're asking, please. Okay, so the question is being posed initially to the sitting councillors, which gives us Brad and Brian. Which one would like to go first?
Doesn't matter.
Brian? Okay. Okay, so Brad's going to go. 1 minute, Brad. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very quick. It's my magnetic personality. I'll hold it out here.
I think you're okay, Brad.
My pacemaker's okay, honest.
I'll restart the clock for you if you want to try the other mic down there.
Sorry.
No problem.
I don't know what happened there. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we're good.
We're good.
I'm still here. So with regards to looking at the density and looking at the data-driven, I would argue that we are slowly getting to that point. Our reports coming from our staff are more data-driven, and we are, I think, we're seeing significant changes at the council level with regards to how the roads work. We now have a number of new two-way conversions that we're moving forward.
Yeah, I think what the questioner was talking about was the supports we need to put in place to make intensification work in different parts of the city. The Ward 3 example, there's no question the one-way streets are dangerous for pedestrians. I'm really excited the Canon bidirectional bike lanes we put in place that goes right through Ward 3. That was unanimous decision by council, which was nice to see. And that, I think, is going to raise the property values and intensification opportunities on both sides of Canon. We also need to look at the parkland in some of those areas. Ward 3 is deficient in parkland. We're making investments right now in a new park in the area, as well as investments in the stadium precinct and the seniors recreation center on the former Scott Park site as well. So we need those supports in place it's not happening fast enough is my frustration, but we'll get there, certainly.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for really going to your times. Who else wants to speak on this? Anybody? Okay. You do, Michael? Okay, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see that bus lane disappear downtown until we put something else in it. It's just wasting money and space. And we do, as far as cars go, they're going to be around for at least 20 years. We have to have one way to go east and a way to go west that's rather convenient for automobiles so they can move through the city, and I'm for a lot less traffic downtown. But because once we have that LRT, there'll be a lot more people coming in from all over, tying the whole GHA, which is the greater Hamilton area, together, making us one, a sense of unity. That's what we need in this city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on this question? If not, we'll move on. Seeing no one. We've got other questions over here in the corner.
Yep, over here.
Are we next here? Justin, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Justin. I think most everyone up there knows me in some capacity. Oh, no, I guess not. The city councilors do, at least. So my question's really directed to the whole panel, and I think that it's, given that we're expecting another 200,000 people to come into our region in the next 20 years, and we have an 85% single occupant vehicle mode share, how do we start building multimodal transportation into every single decision we make? Beyond the pedestrian mobility plan, how do we start building those things, given that we know that there's higher property values and higher retention for talent, especially my generation, the 18 to 34, that are decreasingly buying cars and increasingly looking for walking, cycling, and transit-friendly development?
Okay, Justin made this to the whole panel, so who would like to start on this one? I will. Crystal, go ahead.
First of all, I think any new development outside of or inside of the city too, where it's applicable, we need to develop our new development with complete streets, including bike lanes, including walkability, including neighborhoods. We need to have complete neighborhoods and start at a neighborhood level before we start at a city level. And once we do that, we can outbuild from there. So I think that's our first priority, and then we need to look where we can start with the existing city. You go up on Stone Church, you go on Rymal, we have sidewalks through half of them, if at all in some areas. Where you go downtown, in some cases you can divide the streets up and you can add bike lanes and you can add the sidewalks or expand them, and I think that's great. And we need to start looking at this as a whole. So.
Thank you, Crystal. Fred?
Yes, and my gondolas. Thank you.
Okay,
And my gondolas.
Fred, go ahead.
Thanks. Complete streets, I think, ought to be the standard for all of our streets in our community, but I think it doesn't really speak to the kind of influx of population that we expect to have over the next 20 years. So, I don't want to make the same mistake that Toronto made, which is now looking at lack of investment in public transportation for 30 or 40 years, and now all of a sudden they realize now we've got a congestion problem. So we have an opportunity actually to get out ahead of that by looking at enhanced public transportation, not only in the core, but throughout the entire city. Let's find a way to expand our service in all parts of our city so that we can look at that increased mobility and then provide the full range of options in terms of mobility, like bike lanes. And, I'll tell you, they have to be safe bike lanes. We can't continue to paint a line and think that's a safe biking environment that doesn't work. I like what they do in Toronto, and I think they're doing it or they do in New York City. I think they're doing it on Cannon, where they've actually taken the parking lane and moved it over one lane, and the bike lane is actually between the curb and the parked car. That makes a lot more sense to me, and I think it's an opportunity.
You can add on later. Anybody else on this topic want to discuss it? Brad and then Brian?
Right.
So Brian, you first. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yes. I almost finished.
So I think that's the challenge, right, Justin? 200,000 more people 20 years from now. If we carry on with our current modal split, where cars are still about 88% of the trips that we see in Hamilton or more, we're going to have absolute gridlock. And we sort of celebrate right now that we can get across Hamilton in no time, which is great. But in the future, unless we get that modal split change, we're going to be in serious trouble as a city. It's not going to be livable. So we need to work on the nodes and corridors style of development. The light rail transit does that, where the development occurs along that corridor, and the people move by train east and west across the city. And we need to expand the LRT corridors to the A line up the mountain, or gondolas, I think would be a great idea. That's Crystal's idea. And the other routes on the mountain as well along Rymel and the other parts of the rapid transit. So that's the way to go. The multimodal approach is necessary.
Brian, in the spirit of fairness. Brad, you're next.
Thank you very much. The real challenge, I think, that we have in the city is that we have this large escarpment that divides the city, which makes it really different in terms of services below and above the mountain. If you're living on the mountain, you are not impressed with HSR service at all. They don't have the same frequency, they don't have the same services, they don't have the same connections. And so when they're looking at, and it's important that the entire city understand this so that we're all on the same page. When they're looking at LRT, they're saying it's going 14 kilometers from Eastgate to McMaster, and it takes us an hour to get downtown by the buses from Upper Stony Creek or Ancaster because the frequency isn't there. It would make eminent sense to me if we added BRT, added the dedicated lane in Lower Hamilton, added the BRTs above, added a BRT, perhaps Rymel area all along major core.
I'm going to stop you there, Brad, because you're at a minute. Who's next?
Well, again, if we're running north and south with one LRT line, the whole mountain's covered without all those buses going up and down the mountain. You're going to save a lot of wear and tear on the machine and on fuel savings. So that's going to help pay for it. Does anybody here, I think bicycles are great, but does anybody here feel like I do? They should maybe be obeying the rules of the road a little more? Anybody? Like, I drive a car, and I have a lot of respect for the ones that do. And when I rode a bicycle, I didn't go running across in red lights and stuff like that. So that's why I want to license the bicycles and then educate the people with respect for both sides, the cars and the bicycles.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else want their 1 minute on this question? Anybody else? Okay, so just to remind you of why we're doing this 1 minute cutoff, we're averaging about 10 minutes per question. So we were told by Joe earlier to do the math. I think that was the last slide with the count that he had there. So by my math, with some closing comments from Graham, I'm looking at, I think, what do we have? 4 more questions. So I'm holding these guys and Crystal to a 1 minute, a hard 1 minute, because we want to make sure we get through as many of your questions as we can. So I see a queue for questions over there. Sir, would you like to please identify yourself and your question, who you're posing it to?
Hi, my name's David McLaughlin. First, I'd like to thank the architects for organizing this talk tonight. My question is to anyone who wants to answer, and I want to know, when are we going to cut the sprawl? We can't afford any more subdivisions. We see how little the payback is to subdivisions. Now, our development charges, the staff had just come through with new figures for development charges. It has to go to council, and we know what's going to happen. The staff recommendations are going to be sliced and cut down to shreds.
Can I have your question, sir?
Yes, I'm wondering who is going to show leadership to limit the sprawl.
Okay, and that's open. Who would like to go? Fred, go ahead.
I think it's a matter of council discipline to retain a firm urban boundary. I think that's the critical piece. We can't continue to encroach. And I may not be kind of a warm and fuzzy issue here, but I think we did do or are in the process of doing an urban boundary expansion for employment lands. I think that's a critical piece. I think we need to do that. But at the same time, there should not be any residential component to that whatsoever. So we need to maintain a firm urban boundary, and I think we ought to agree to is that we maintain that urban boundary for 20 or 30 years, and that we force that we provide opportunities for all of the development to happen within the boundary, but no opportunity for it to happen outside of the boundary. And I think that really requires some council discipline and some hard decisions in terms of locking that in for 20 or 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Next I've got Michael, then Brad. Michael had his hand up first. Go ahead.
First, we have to raise the cost. We have to charge them a heck of a lot more for what they want to develop in a field. Make it so we're making money. It costs a lot of money to put a sewer in.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Brad?
Thank you. I'm actually, perhaps I'm the one odd man out, but I'm actually pretty pleased with the way the council has performed on development charges in the last 8 years. When I was elected, the development charges hadn't gone up, and I don't even remember how long, but it was a hell of a long time. We're now recommending $35,808 for single-family homes. That's a huge increase from where we were, and it's not quite cost recovery. We're still $770,000 that has to be funded elsewhere. So we're not at full cost recovery. Even with what's being presented this time round, we're still not at the full cost recovery. But we have moved in that direction very strongly. So I've been pleased with that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on this question? Brian?
I think the other key, though, is to intensify within the existing city, right? Look at all the opportunities and actually achieve that 40% target, in fact, exceed it, that the province of Ontario has given us. We can say, let's cap the urban boundary, but we actually have to provide the supports and the services, the proper transportation throughout the city, along the nodes and corridors in order to facilitate the intensification, proper zoning, and that sort of thing. So we can certainly do all that. We know how to do all that stuff, but we actually just have to roll it out. And I think we're doing that to some extent, but unless we do that, we're not going to get the result that we want.
Thank you. Anyone else on this particular question? Thank you all for keeping your comments under 1 minute. That's great. Now let's get to our next question. Sir, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is David Brown. I'd like to thank you all for participating this evening. I'd also like to thank the architects for arranging this meeting. It was great. In Joe's comments, he was talking about not only the increase in density and the return that we're getting on that investment, but he was also talking about the employment and the jobs and the return that we see in that. In some of the comments in response to the initial question this evening, it was talking about development charges. It was talking about brownfields and incentives to see the redevelopment of those brownfields, and also to see some form of development charge, let's say relaxation, as it applies to the renewal of those brownfield sites. So my question would be, and I'd like to hear Mr. Eisenberger's response initially, because he was the one that sort of spoke or started down that road, but I would like to hear the other members' comments. How do you see an incentive program in a development charges context and working, and how do you see that return, if you will, on that investment, that we're going to see the type of job growth that we're looking for in those areas? Thank you.
Okay, I'll let Fred start off with that, but just before you start, Fred, if people at the back, thank you for shutting those doors. We can actually hear the lobby from up here. Okay, Fred, go ahead. 1 minute.
Yeah, so one of our big challenges as a community, and I think others have said this before, we don't necessarily have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem, and the revenue problem lies predominantly on the commercial industrial side, on a lot of the kind of commercial industrial tax base that we've lost over the last 30 or 40 years or more. And it's been an ongoing effort to try and get to replacing that industry and that job opportunity. And it does directly relate to brownfields. And, there's if we can create a variable rate for even brownfields as an infill opportunity, and I see the residential and the commercial industrial kind of in the same light. If you're going to provide incentives for things you want brownfield redevelopment because it's existing infrastructure that will be useful for you down the road and to retool and bring back into viable use. So why not create a variable rate or a differential rate, as Brian suggested, that allows for incentives for brownfield redevelopment? And we do have some of that. So the ERASE program and those things do that.
I'm sorry, Fred, I'm going to stop you there. It's a minute. We're keeping this fair. Anybody else want to speak to that issue? Brad, go ahead, and then Brian.
Yeah, thank you very much. We do have brownfield programs in place that have actually been very beneficial to the city, and I am keen on seeing lower industrial DCs. The challenge when we start getting into variable DCs and exemptions of DCs, the Development Charge Act forces us to pass on those costs to the rate budget. We can't put it onto other development charges. So if we lower certain development charges in one area, we can't put it onto the development charges in another area. That's by the Development Charges Act. So they get attached to our budget. Right now it's $8 million annually that we're moving around because of the exemptions in place that we already have. So we need to make sure that we find the ones that are sensible and that are working to our benefit.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Brian was next, and who else wanted to speak on this issue? Michael, you did as well, Ejaz? Okay.
Just put a quick plug in for an organization, Canadian organization called Sustainable Prosperity. Some of you may know about them, but they're a group of economists who look at the costs of services. How do you disincent different behavior? And a very simple example here in Hamilton. We never used to have water meters. You can remember when water meters went in. People could use as much water as they possibly wanted, and the price of water was quite low. Now, when we've got water meters in place and we've raised the cost for water, people are using much less water. Water consumption is what we were driving by the economic decisions that we made as a city. So we need to look at the pricing of water. We need to look at the pricing of development, different types of development, and provide the incentives and disincentives in order to people to act the way that they would. People, we buy things. We do everything we do is based on economic principles. Have a look at the sustainable prosperity stuff. It's quite exciting.
There. Thanks a lot, Brian. Next up, I think we had Michael. Go ahead, and then Ejaz.
Seems to me that if we deny building permits mostly, we got to stop urban sprawl and start charging what it actually costs us to flush the toilet from Mount Hope and dump it over there in the east end of Hamilton. And the brownfields will fill up because the property will become more valuable because people don't want to build way out there. And let's face it, people can hardly afford gas anymore, so they're going to start looking at downtown, and they're going to start looking, how do we get around? And this is the LRT. Thank you.
Thank you, Ejaz. You setting your own timer, Ejaz? It's a good idea.
I guess when we are talking about the brownfield, it is the harbor front. The main thing which we are concerned that we should get involved with the private and the public sectors to invest their money into this area for the residential and the commercial properties. And again, those who are doing the commercial things and they want to hire a few people, and then they should be given some kind of a subsidy and tax relax so that the business should get established over there, and the people who come for the visit for the front yard, they can enjoy over there, and it will be a good environment for the people to work over there too.
Okay, that time. And Crystal? Yeah, go ahead.
Like I had said previously, I think when it comes to our brownfields, we should be looking at some of them and possibly giving them away for free to bring the developers in that could do something there. We need to talk to the residents in those areas. They're really smart, and they know what would fit in a lot of those areas. In some cases, they even know what the areas are contaminated with and can give us, as council, direction to bring a certain type of developer into that area. And I think that's important to remember.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next question. Do we have another one over here? Go ahead, please.
Hi there. My name's Anna. In light of some recently released provincial documents that show that the OLG is currently looking for a private sector operator for a casino in Hamilton, and that the OLG does have a stated goal of a casino in downtown Hamilton by 2015, I would like to ask all of the candidates what their views on the downtown casino issue are, and if they will oppose it or if they would allow it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Who would like to start with this one? Brian will take it first. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so this is a debate we had in Hamilton, council did have in terms of a downtown casino. I was strongly against a downtown casino, and I continue to be so. I think it's false economy. I talked a moment ago about the importance of economic instruments, and although would be spending at a casino, there's all kinds of negative consequences to that spending. Folks that can't afford to spend it, people that lose their whole families, become addicted to gambling. And, you just need to look at where downtown Hamilton is right now. It's on the rebound. A lot of great stuff happening in our downtown, the new hotels, the downtown family medicine facility, and the Royal Connaught coming back. So we absolutely do not need a downtown casino to rejuvenate the downtown. In fact, it would take it in the exact opposite direction.
Thank you. Who's next? Sister?
Yeah, we're going to go in order, we said
You guys
here.
just want to go right down the line? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Laura. I'm sorry.
No one takes over my debates, so go ahead.
First, I'd like to say that I am opposed to a casino downtown, but I'm not opposed to a casino in our city. I think that we should be looking outside of the downtown. I think we should be lobbying the OLG to redirect where we can put a casino in our city, because I think we do have a great spot for it and a great location for it. And I don't think we should pass up the opportunity for the tax revenue that it could ensue.
Okay, Fred, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it was asked on Twitter the same question a little while ago, and my answer remains the same. It hasn't changed. I do not support a downtown casino. I'm not anti-casino. I mean, personally I am. I don't care to go. I don't see the value for my own personal self. But I do know that many people in our community do go, and they do go to other communities. So I'm perfectly fine with the casino out in Flamborough. I don't believe it adds value to a redevelopment of our downtown in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, Brad.
Thank you very much. I was actually very pleased to see the auditor's report, because it actually showed what the government was doing, and they weren't telling us what they were really doing. The gutting of the horse racing in Flamborough and Fort Erie really hurt the casino business significantly, and you just need to go and talk to them and they'll tell you that. The other interesting thing, Laura, is that I don't know of any city in Ontario that actually supported the government in wanting a casino in their city. So we have one in Flamborough. We were very pleased as a council to have that. The revenue's flowing from it. It's well under control. And we would prefer to see it actually expanded out there and left where it is. And that has continued and continues to be my position. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad. Michael, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah. In the last two elections, I spoke in Flamborough, and Flamborough wants a casino. They've got a racetrack, they've got the space, and it's not downtown.
Okay, Nijas.
Last year I was in Las Vegas. I never gambled, but somehow I got and I won a few $100s from there. Thank God my Muslim community doesn't know about it, otherwise they will put me stone to death. Well, when I went there, I didn't see anything else other than casinos. And the money which was being used and the hotels I saw over there, the limousines and all those people coming in and going, spending millions of dollars. So I was thinking to myself, after all these people, those who are coming here, they must be winning something. As far as the Hamilton is concerned, I think I agree with Brad Clark. We have the casino in the Flamborough.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Ijaz. You're at your 1 minute on that question. Okay, are there any other questions? As I mentioned, we've got...
So we don't want to have the Hamilton.
We've got one time for one or two questions, if there's any left. There's a woman right here. There's actually, it looks like there's two questions. Okay, go ahead. Either one of you, we've got time for both.
Hi.
Yeah, I think if you talk to it, they'll adjust a little. There you go.
Hi, my name's Denise Minardi. My question is around practical ideas for civic education and engagement. What are your ideas so that more Hamiltonians can get involved in conversations such as this and share their expertise about their neighborhoods?
And I'm sorry, who were you directing that to?
All of the candidates.
All of them? Okay, Fred, you want to go first? Go ahead.
So we need to do a much better job of civic engagement on all issues. I mean, I mentioned that about public transportation. I think it's one of those critically important issues where we need to get broader public input. And even though we've had some in the past, it's lagged in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of sharing of information. So we need to do a better job not only on that issue, but in local neighborhoods. We have social media that can help us do that now better than ever. We should do budget consultations not once we've set the budget, but prior to setting the budget, so that people can have actually an opportunity to actually bring their ideas forward before the budget is set. We just need to do a better consultative civic engagement process all the way across the board, and there's no reason why we can't do that.
Thank you. Crystal had her hand up next.
For civic engagement, I've said it from the beginning and I'm going to say it again. I think our councillors need to get out into their communities more. We find them knocking on doors once every 4 years. We find them engaging effectively with their citizens once every 4 years, and that needs to change. We need to get our councillors out from behind their computers, out of their desks in their offices, and get involved with their communities in various ways. If every time we had a volunteer garbage cleanup and our councillors were out there, they'd meet different people and they'd be able to talk to these different people about their concerns and about the things that we need to change in our city. And that's just one example. Or have a monthly barbecue in your community and in your neighborhoods and get out there and meet your citizens and ask them what is their driving force. Not the same people that are being the thorn in your side that is driving you to make your decisions.
I think Brian had his hand up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, lots of room for improvement in this area of the city, and council knows it. Our city manager, Chris Murray, knows it. I think there's lots of possibilities through electronic means to get consultation as well. I think the days when people have the time to attend a lot of public meetings seem to be leaving us to some extent. So I think we need to find ways. The electronic town hall that we did for the downtown casino issue, we had about 20,000 people involved that night through the town hall at City Hall. So that was tremendous. The participatory budgeting is a process that we've tried in Ward 1 and Ward 2, which is to show some promise, asking people where they think their money should be spent. An early discussion, as Fred just said, in the budget process, instead of asking folks what they want to see happen in their budget in February or March when we've made most of the decisions, which is what's happened this year. I just want to put a plug in for the citizens panel approach that Fred introduced for the area rating process. I tried to introduce that for the one-way, two-way complete street
Let me stop
process,
you there, Brian.
but that didn't work out.
Thank you very much. Who's next? You want to go over to Fred?
Yeah, one of the real challenges that I've learned in the last 8 years is that not everyone is tuning into local media. So we have to find the ways to actually get to the residents in their homes. When you start looking at surveys and who they're tuning into and how many times you need to repeat the message that there's a public meeting or to go here to be engaged, it really is failing because, one announcement in the paper in the bottom right-hand corner, which is in legal mumble-jumble gobbledygook that no one really understands and they don't come to the meeting. So we're trying to use plainer language to make sure that more people are involved.
Thank you. Michael?
I've been running since 1985, and we're talking about engaging the people, yet I've never seen one issue on a ballot. We've got one mayor here and 2 councillors. We're talking about fluoride. No, we're the plebeians, that's us, the common folk. We're too dumb, I guess, to understand. It's no wonder people don't vote. There's nothing to vote for. The little bit that we do hear about the people that are running, like me, it's the press puts whoever they want up front, and the issues, I want to vote on something, not just who's going to be next. That's like a dictatorship. I don't want fluoride. We could have a vote here, it'd mean nothing, but we got to vote, and we paid for it, and it's coming, and it's still a popularity contest, and whoever you put in, you're not going to like them, because every election we keep voting the guy out because we didn't like him, but we liked him enough to put him in.
Thanks, Michael.
Vote for me.
I think it's the communication problem. And I have been going into a lot of meetings, probably all the councillors knows. And when they call the meeting, there are probably 5-10 people are there. The communication problem, what is that they just put a small advertisement in the newspaper, which nobody reads it. And nobody knows what is going to happen in those meetings. In the past, what they used to do they used to send the letter right to the people, those who are involved in it. And once they get the letter, then they know that what time the meeting is and when you are going to discuss all those things. I think we have to change that communication system, and we have to start sending the letter to the people in their houses so that they can come to the meeting and raise their voice, whatever the problem is.
And that's time for you on this one. Thank you very much to the panel. I think we have one more question. She's been waiting. Go ahead, please.
My name is Mary Ellen Scanlon, and my question is going to appear to be in a completely different area, but it isn't really. Someone earlier commented on Joe's analysis of density for Hamilton and how it was skewed because so much of the area within our boundaries is rural. Much of that rural land is some of the best farmland in Canada. And I wanted to ask both the serving councillors and also Fred during his time as mayor, is council aware of the current market value of that farmland? The price of farmland in Ontario and elsewhere in Canada has been going up. And in terms of counting our blessings or our assets, do we fully understand as a community what that land is worth?
Okay. So she wants to hear from Fred and the councillors, and then, of course, the rest of you can have a minute on it if you like. Fred, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a critical asset for our community. About 70 or 2/3 of our land mass is actually agricultural, and it's of enormous value. We did set out a rural official plan, which actually addressed a lot of the issues around what should you allow to happen in those rural communities, and how do you continue to protect the agricultural space that we have. I think the Greenbelt legislation was particularly helpful to kind of lock out significant areas in terms of that incursion that development wants to do. I think it's critically important that we not only value it, but that we continue to use it as part of our agricultural industry and economy. There's an enormous amount of value in terms of jobs and potential jobs and agribusiness that is a large part of what we can continue to grow in our community that can provide jobs and economy and revenues into the future. So it's critically important. It actually fits very well with our port, which actually moves a lot of things around in our community.
I'll stop you there. Thanks, Fred. She wanted to hear from the two councillors first, and then I can get to you, Michael. Okay, go ahead, Brad.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the city has a pretty good understanding in terms of the value of the agricultural property. One of the challenges with the city, specifically if we have a number of urban planners, is to understand the impediment certain fees have and how development charges work within the agricultural community. And we've found that when you sit down and talk to the farmers, there are programs that we need to adjust to encourage additional farming, encourage greenhouses, and make sure that we're not charging them for water that they're not utilizing, and all of these things. It becomes very complicated. And Councillor Pursuta and Councillor Johnson and Councillor Partridge has been very
of the value of farmland. About 60% of our municipality is rural, and it's a far different landscape and a far different series of challenges that farmers face than we have in other parts of the city. And I've been hearing it campaigning in Flamborough in particular that they need a whole different set of policies out there. That's where the de-amalgamation discussion was the hottest, and I think that's behind us now. But they'd like to be treated differently. They'd like us to understand the challenges they have, and it goes to farmers who are aging, who have farms, and their kids may not be coming up who wanting to be farmers anymore. So there's farmer training programs we're working on. There's ways to try and get that land in some form of a land trust to transfer it between different farmers. It's a challenge.
I'll have to stop you there. Michael, go ahead.
I saw the answer on the big board earlier today. Marijuana. Money, money, money. Medical funds.
Yeah, I know.
Best question to last. I
Do
like
you want
that
to take
one.
the rest of your minute on the marijuana thing? No? You're good? Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on this question? Okay. Well, I think that's it for this evening. I don't see anyone else running towards the microphone. I want to thank, I'm sure Graham will have some closing remarks, but I want to thank the audience. I've done a lot of these debates, and that was incredibly respectful, and your questions were really, really challenging. So thank you. That was really great. Yeah, they were great. And I'd also like to thank the candidates. You know, if they can be in a format like this, getting those big questions, sticking to their 1 minute times, being completely fair with each other, we're in good stead for the rest of the election year and to having these candidates and possibly more up here on the dais. So that was really well done, guys. Thank you. And Crystal, thank you so much. That was really nicely done. Thank you. And I just want to say quickly, Graham, Graham set and his team set the rules for this debate and the format, and I think it was a wonderfully informative evening. So I just want to say thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so thanks to Laura, thanks to the panel. I have to say one quick announcement. We've had the last couple of years Matt Jelly helping us with our graphics for these events and talking about etching our assets in stone. He has those wonderful neighborhood maps, and they're for sale in the lobby, so I encourage you to go take a look at those. I guess I should thank the committee, which was myself, Emma Cubitt, Phil Toms, Dusan Stupar, Dave Premi, and Sylvia Harris, and I'm forgetting one person, Ken Coit. It's the third year that we've had this committee together, and we keep getting better, which is very encouraging. Thanks for coming out. Thank you to our panelists for coming. That was a great evening. And of course, thanks to Joe for bringing his knowledge to our town. And yeah, thanks to Laura. Thank you, Brian. Thanks to Laura. All right. That's it. I'm done. Thanks.